So, hey guys, today we're going to be talking about boss monsters. And I honestly think, we have some design space that we're not really utilizing in Yu-Gi-Oh right now, so let's talk about that, I guess. So, right now, if we see like a Towers monster, it's just a lot of, it depends on the exact monster, but it's a lot of, frowny face, I guess, right? So, if we look at a banned card like Rongo Miniat, what was the actual problem with Rongo Miniat? So Rongo Miniat simply put is not fair because your opponent cannot normal or special summon monsters. And then we have all these other effects as well, where it can actually not be destroyed by battle. It gains 1,500 attack or defense. It's unaffected by other card effects, and it can destroy all cards your opponent controls. And I mean, worst case scenario now, technically you could like make a 5 material like Rongo Miniad and then do a sales ban, and then for some reason, because Rongo Miniad actually detaches for effect, well it just won't be able to detach. So your opponent forever cannot normal or special summon monsters, and it's also uh, a 3k guy that cannot be destroyed by battle and unaffected by card effects. So how do you beat this? The only possible way you could beat this is pretty much by having no monsters in your deck and just trying to resolve Exodia by doing things like resolving Chicken Game, Upstart Goblin, and just drawing your way out of it. That's about it, really. So simply put, Rongo Miniad is hella unfair. But did Rongo Miniad necessarily need to be this unfair? Well, honestly, if we just remove the part where your opponent cannot normal or special summon monsters, what does Rongo Miniad really do? If we look at the card as a whole and just disregard that Bamboozling Gossip Shadow exists for a second, because uh, Bamboozling Gossip Shadow paired with this is kind of unfair, so the fact that this is also a number monster kind of sucks in that regard. If it wasn't a number, Bamboozling Gossip Shadow wouldn't be able to attach itself to Rongo Miniad as material. But yeah, we would have the fact where Rongo Miniad cannot be destroyed by battle. It gains 1,500 attack/defense unaffected by other cards' effects, and soft once per turn, you can destroy all cards your opponent controls. But it's kind of hefty to get this far onto Rongo Miniad, right? To the 5 material effect. But if we just look at it, then we have probably, since well, with how XYZ summoning kind of works, you could technically go up to 6 material Roncominia by putting a level 4 Synchro in the extra monster zone when you XYZ summon Roncominia, but otherwise you just have a full field of level 4 monsters, and we're likely going to just have the effect of, we're going to have 5 material on Roncominia most likely at best. And that this is still fairly hard, so you would only go up to maybe 4 or 3. So if we're going first, though, we wouldn't be able to utilize this effect on our opponent because it is not a quick effect unless we had a 6 material Rongo Miniad, assuming we are making Rongo Miniad on the first turn, and we can just summon this in like attack or defense, and yeah, we're pretty chilling because this isn't going to be outed for a while. So if we're at 5 mat, that will take 1 turn, 2 turn, 3 turns for it to be affected by our opponent's card effects. They'll be in the end phase as well. And then for it to be destroyed in battle, that's like 5 turns, I guess. But specifically 5 viewer turns. So overall, it's like you kind of have to do some doubling. So it's like 10, 6 turns or something like that. And it outs itself kind of eventually, and this effect, you won't necessarily be able to utilize it. And even if you do, it'll likely only be once. And this is under the assumption that you're going first anyways. And if you're going second, of course, bro, I put like a 5 level 4 warrior monsters on the field, and you didn't do anything about it, and I'm going second. Like, honestly, not much of an excuse for, Rongo Mania being able to be summoned in this case. So perfectly fair card and pretty balanced as well. In this case, we would probably have to replace effect number 4 with something else. Like, I don't know, maybe a quick effect return card. Yeah, something like that, I guess. Non-target, return a card, quick effect. Uh, to either the deck or hand, I guess. And that would be good enough, I think. Probably. And now Ronco Miniad becomes something you can just wall up against while dealing with your opponent's other threats, because you won't necessarily be hit by insane removal. I guess maybe if we just made it quick effect target destruction, like just pop a monster or something like that, that also wouldn't be that bad. Because Ronco Miniad, it's just a 3k guy. So if you just summon a guy that's bigger than 3k, Ronco Miniad can't get over it. And it's kind of like, what do we do here? Maybe it's could be something like destroy a monster with quick effect, destroy like a monster that has less attack or defense than Rongo Miniad, or Rongo Miniad's like original attack defense or something. Maybe something like that would work also. And then you just have to, well, just weather the storm until at least Rongo has less than 3 materials, and then it's affected by card effects, and then you can just simply out it, right? But in this case, you know, this is extremely brutal, and it's pretty hard. Well, we're looking at the current iteration of Rongo Miniad and how it works. It's just brutal, and you just can't do a thing if this gets summoned. So it's pretty GG. This is unironically worse than getting hit by a Kali Yuga, because, you know, at least maybe you can play the turn, well, your turn after, if it gets to that point. But with Rongo Miniad, nope. Not in the slightest. Unfortunately, I suppose. Not even remotely playable. But the general idea of Ronku Miniad, I do like. You know, it's just a boss monster that will, for some reason, out itself eventually, so you just have to kind of survive against it for a while. So maybe we could have a boss monster that on special summon destroys or sends all other cards to the graveyard or something. So this would include your own, kind of like a Zeus effect. And then maybe it has something like it's unaffected, it can't be destroyed by battle, but after, let's say, I don't know, 2 or 3 turns, well, maybe it's your turns or turns overall, I don't know. The card will then destroy itself or send it to the graveyard via its own effect. And then this effect will maybe have another condition tied to it, like the monster will burn you for its attack points doubled or something. And whatever effect the monster has, I mean, after the initial thing, could be something interesting, but like not too strong, because it'd be problematic to an extent if it were too strong. And then also, let's see what else. Maybe it prevents just yourself from summoning if it has a decent effect, right? There's just some design space here for towers to make them more interesting. And maybe because it has the other restriction, you can make it so it's harder to out. Like maybe you can't do something like Kaiju on this. Maybe you would need to go into specifically Underworld Goddess to out it, which adds some like counterplay for both players. So if I don't want to get Goddess, I can prevent you from having too many monsters on the field. If maybe um, my opponent were to want to out this, then they would technically have the option to out it earlier with like a Goddess. And I'm thinking like, you know, if we had like a stat line like Ade's Arc Ray Dragon, then we would burn ourselves for 8k when this card gets sent to the graveyard, so we have to end the game before our tower's monster is gone. So it's not something like that sounds fun to me. And that does also have the upside of, in my opinion, not in a degenerate way, well, setting up a kind of boss monster that will prolong the game, but not in a too disgusting kind of way. So the summoning conditions, I mean, it kind of depends for like a monster like this. It shouldn't be like too free, shouldn't be too hard. So there should be like a middle ground in that regard. And then I suppose to make things a little bit more fair, maybe we have something like uh, preventing you from ending the game with your towers monster like immediately. So maybe the turn you special summon it, and specifically, actually not the turn you special summon it, but the turn you activate the board wipe effect, it can't attack or something. At least maybe not directly, if it can at all attack. But I mean, you did board wipe, so I'm not really sure if you need to, but saying attack directly I think is fair. Just a regular attack I think should be like kind of okay, right? So that sounds good to me. And also the boss monster should absolutely not be possible to cheat out, because cheating out like broke ass boss monsters has always been kind of an issue. So if we look at Exterio, well, a fusion summon of this card can only be done with the above fusion materials, but a special summon of this card from the extra deck requires absolutely nothing. You can just special summon this from your extra deck via any effect that's a special summon, like whatever extra deck monster, it can just summon Exterio. Well, yeah, that's kind of disgusting, and Exterio is essentially going to be not once per chain, not once per turn, spell, trap, negate. So essentially you're locked out of both activating spells and traps now. So now you're only left with your what color even are normal cards? Your yellowish brown cards, your brownish yellow cards. Yeah, that's about it. It's just your monster cards. That means no blue cards. Or is this more a green or a blue? Uh, I guess that's kind of blue, like blue green. I'm leaning more towards blue the more I look at this color. So your blue cards and your purple cards are not going to be activatable. I guess link cards are also blue, but yeah, you know, it's not this blue. But yeah, all right. So another thing I really like seeing in general with boss monsters is just well, it's like boss monsters that clearly feel very much like boss monsters. So, for example, Har, this really feels like a boss monster. It's a pretty big guy, and it really only works in archetype for the most part. So you're going to be able to tribute some tokens, and then you have the effect to kind of hand loop with Har. So that's pretty nice. And then we also have something like a Doom King. So Doom King, I think, is really nice because it really synergizes with Zombie World. And because of Zombie World, Doom King is able to reach its full potential. That kind of boss monster, I think, is pretty cool. And there is synergy between the two cards, right? So because Zombie World is a field spell, Doom King, Ballad Rock will come back every single standby phase if you manage to remove it from the field, and you do not happen to remove Zombie World. But if you do also just control a field spell in general, then Doom King will still come back. So that's kind of neat, but it's not as strong as before because now my opponent might not have zombie monsters, so I can't as easily activate Doom King. And I might only be able to utilize like one of the two effects on Doom King then. Except I guess I can technically negate Ash Blossom Joe Spring, which is a zombie that everyone's playing, but that's just a 30% chance for your opponent to open. So honestly, I don't think you're that likely to see this happen. It's kind of a rare event, honestly, where we have like no zombie world, but Doom King on the field, and our opponent here Ash Blossoming something. But I mean, if they knew, then they should probably hold it anyway. So it's like, yeah, Ash Blossom is indeed a zombie. So yeah, Doom King is pretty neat because, you know, it has some powerful effects, but they're not overly oppressive, I don't think. Well, I mean, sometimes Zombie World by itself can be kind of oppressive to certain decks, which, I mean, it is what it is. If your deck is basically just, uh, well, built around one type and it's not archetypal, that's just the nature of things, and that's how Zombie World kind of ruins you. Like if you're playing Dragon Link, you have no more dragons. If you're playing insect deck, no more insects. Cyberse deck, no more Cyberses. If you're playing an attribute deck, you're still fine. If you're playing an archetypal deck like Unchained, free support, because not now Yama is just generic feed support kind of for whatever reason. Like I honestly don't fully understand that decision, but I mean because of that, the normal summon tour guide, I guess, is a one card combo. Aside from that, I can't really see too much benefit off of this currently from Yama working like this, but all right, I guess. Then we have uh, a card like let's see. I think certain cards are kind of more oppressive than others, but let's see. What's another interesting kind of boss monster? Yeah, let's go with this. So we have Deus Machinax. I think Deus Machinax is actually pretty cool. So the effect here specifically is going to destroy your own cards or detach guys in order for Machinax to attach monsters on the field to itself. Kinda. So that this general effect is pretty cool, and then we also have some stuff for follow-up plays. So, for example, we can special summon Ragnarok as a scale. If we put well, special summon the Ragnarok that is a scale. If we have Deus Machinax setting itself as a pendulum card, which I think is pretty neat. And the fact that this is pretty much only playable for the most part in DD, I think is pretty neat. So, like when a monster can get hit by like a triple tactics talents and it can't be utilized fully by your opponent, I usually really like seeing that. So, for example, if you triple tactics Arise Heart feels kind of bad. So, the one good thing about Arise Heart is that its effect is soft once per turn, and because it's soft once per turn instead of hard once per turn, hard once per turn effects usually mention the player. So, it's like you can only use this effect of this card once per turn. And because this card is a soft once per turn instead, that means if the effect is already activated to banish a card on the field, then if my opponent takes with triple tactics talents, then Arise Heart can no longer activate its effect afterwards. Because I already did it, so Arise Heart is kind of there. It kind of works like that almost. It's just like not quite in the same way as I would like with certain other monsters. So if we were to go ahead and grab, for example, uh, Maizen or Yagurumaru. So if my opponent just took my face down Yagurumaru, they flip it face up. They have no other ninja card or ninjutsu art card in either their hand, graveyard, or face up field to banish, so they would not be able to utilize Yagurumaru. So in my hands, Yagurumaru could be a disgusting card that is going to be banishing a card every single turn, more or less, right? But when my opponent takes Yagurumaru, Yagurumaru is just a useless 2k 2k monster. Kind of the same deal with Maizen. That this just becomes a 2.5k guy that can attack directly for my opponent. For me, it allows all of my monsters to attack my opponent directly, and I can also anytime my opponent activates a card effect, I can special summon a ninja from my deck. But my opponent would not be able to do so because they are likely not playing ninjas, so they have no ninjas whatsoever to summon. So, yeah. That's kind of how that goes, I suppose. And even if they were to take, for example, my Geo, flipping my monsters face down doesn't matter because I can contact views with my face down monsters. So yeah, we're fine against Geo as well. The only thing you could do that might be annoying is if you were to be able to somehow trigger the effect here for target one card your opponent controls, destroy it, which I don't think is too likely, but yeah. Uh, None of my monsters here really kind of like it feels like truly like they are my monsters specifically, if that makes sense. Like they're my monsters, not my opponent's monsters. That feeling, uh, when you know your monsters that they're really not backstabbing you, I guess, is one way to put it. So something like, for example, Shizhao, right? Shizhao also has a pretty specific condition for the negate here. So in my hands, Shizhao would be like a monster negate every single turn. In my opponent's hands, it's a 2.8k beater. That's it, because you have no Sword Souls or Wire monsters to banish from either your hand or graveyard, right? And then all of the generators kind of feel like this as well. They'll just be big guys, and you can't really activate or do anything with them. I mean, Jormungandr is probably the only thing you can kind of use, but Jormungandr's effect isn't that great, honestly. And Leviathan, the generator boss of Shadows here, specifically goes into Jormungandr, which means you need to be playing Jormungandr in the extra deck, which you likely won't be doing unless you're playing Generator, so it technically doesn't do anything for you here. So that's kind of nice. And then we have an effect like, for example, Shenshen, where we just genuinely, I don't think we cared that much about Shenshen's effect that banishes, and the effect to return a card from the banish pile to the graveyard. I mean, you can utilize that, I guess. So something like Shenshen doesn't feel too bad because honestly, Shenshen's not that powerful of a monster. So yeah, doesn't actually have any removal or anything. It's just good for the grind game, I suppose, for the most part. Even the effect to banish a card, so any card sent from the field to the graveyard is banished instead. I don't think that hurts Virtual World that much. So probably in general, fine, unless you remove like Chuche, I guess. In which case, kind of annoying, but probably still fine, honestly, because you can still send stuff from the graveyard. Yeah. Or not from the graveyard, from the deck to the graveyard. And then we also have, oh, this is another one I like a lot. We have, let's see, Boral and Dragon. So Boral and Dragon has the effect to negate here, but it requires you to special summon a rocket monster in your graveyard. So if you have no rocket monster, you cannot do the negate. So a boss monster with a conditional kind of effect that requires some kind of condition to be met. Yeah, I also like those types of boss monsters as well. So, you know, a generic boss monster, I just in general like them a lot less, but something like a Baron is just useful to have around on your end board, I guess, right? So just the generic Omni Negate, and then you also have the float effect that can float into another guy. It can be useful, I guess, just in general in a lot of situations. You also have the pop effect. In fact, it kind of makes me question why Baron actually has 3 effects, but you know, it is what it is, I guess. So we have that going for us, I guess, you know, with the generics that they're just usually useful, but like when they have too many effects and they're too generic, it kind of just puts a bad taste in my mouth a little bit. I mean, like SP is kind of generic as well, and it's kind of an annoying card. I mean, you can kind of understand why like these generics are in the game, right? It's just so your opponent can play the game under more circumstances. So hopefully both players have more fun, I guess. Maybe. I think that's the idea. You know, like it'd be really goofy if you just had like a relatively normal back row and then your opponent just couldn't out it. like at all. Like assuming we have like time pendulum graph and no protection on this, and my opponent just couldn't remove this because their deck just has no macro removal because their archetype just doesn't have any. Yeah, they would need to like uh, hit you up with like a Nightmare Phoenix, Nightmare Unicorn, SP, or some other Link generic. Otherwise, they just can't play the game for the dumbest reason. In this case, they wouldn't necessarily even be getting floodgated. It's just they can't do anything about Time Pendulum Graph, which is kind of sad, I would say, honestly, to an extent. But yeah, boss monsters that truly feel like your boss monsters and yours alone. You know, it allows you to kind of develop a connection to these monsters, which I kind of like. You know, it feels like he's like my guy. You know, it's like feels like your boss monsters are kind of like your friends. You know, your allies, that type of thing. You know, so that is something I enjoy. You know, just eh, that well that type of thing. Damn, it kind of sounds like I'm getting parasocial with like Maizen or Arise Heart, but yeah, they are kind of your monsters, which I like, and your opponent they would have their monster as well. So if I were to take their monster or whatever, I wouldn't be able to fully utilize it because my deck doesn't do the thing that necessarily will mesh with their boss monster. Like if you take a generator boss monster, you wouldn't be able to tribute the right things for it, so you wouldn't be able to activate their effects. Just for example, and yeah, I mean, the less generic a boss monster is, I think the cooler it is. And I mean, strengths of the boss monsters, they also have to like have some conditionals on them, which is a little bit awkward. But if you're playing the correct archetype and it just functions, I think that's also pretty nice, like with Chijia or any of our ninja fusions here. So yeah, that's all I got for you guys today, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Bye.